I'm going to turn off the fountain in the garden here, and maybe that'll help me to get audio. I don't know what the situation is. Hang on 2 minutes. Yeah, that might work better. Can you just speak so I can at least see if I can hear you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, very faint, but enough to hear whatever question you're asking, and then as long as you're getting the capture your end, that's all that really matters.
Okay, so how are you today?
It's been a long one, very long one.
Okay, so it's nighttime where you're at. It's morning.
It's 10:15 p.m. Yeah.
Okay, so Sasha, I just wanted to introduce you to the people who aren't aware of you or your work, and I'm just gonna basically go about this based on your bio, just to make it simple, and then we can take it from there.
I'm happy to do anything from alien DNA to global sustainable economics, but I don't like being asked a general question like, oh, so tell us about. I'm like, fuck you, because it's too big. It'd take 3 hours to go into it, and it's too exhaustive, because I don't know what the angle is or what I should be speaking to. So if you can, for me, be really cool if you could just be specific as you can.
Okay, that's fine. So yeah. I'm just gonna go based on your bio, and I have here, you were a former rock musician and artist. You grew up in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe throughout the war for independence. You also established Humanitat in 1999. After conducting a 5-year diplomat campaign, you engaged Humanitat upon both NGO and IGO playing fields as an outspoken advocate of human rights and natural justice. You also instigated peace initiative and education programs and have lobbied against human rights abuses in different parts of the globe, and you continue to prosecute for the protection of breakthrough innovators, scientists, and doctors. You are also the founder of New Earth Project, New Earth Nation, the world's most integrated movement promulgating sustainable, sovereign, and self-determining communities, which operates as a universal trust engaging micronations by treaty and exists outside of fictitious enclosures dreamt up by self-serving corporations, governments, and institutions. Okay, basically, how did you, get into this? You were a musician, and then now it's just like you're creating waves.
Well, rock and roll is supposed to be anti-establishment, and it is anti-establishment if it's done properly. But there comes a day in rock and roll when it's time to move on. Or you can end up like Mick Jagger at the age of 73, strutting your stuff and doing the same shit you were doing 50 years ago. And I guess that's kind of cool if you're Mick Jagger or Steve Tyler or Jimmy Page, but really, for any generations that went after those kind of original rock gods, it's a little bit sad to be strutting your stuff 40, 50 years later in the same way. So I just decided when I was still young and relatively pretty that I would pull out and do something useful, something really revolutionary. Because at the end of the day, also, I learned that in the music business, you are a slave. There is nothing, this rebellious revolutionary thing is a myth. And, the Jimi Hendrixes and the Janis Joplins and those kind of cats who all died at the age of 27 and Jim Morrison, hey, there's a reason for that. Look into it.
I agree. So when would you say you completely awakened?
Oh, I hope I've not completely awakened, because if I had completely awakened, I'd leave this plane altogether and have nothing more to do with it. I think the whole point is that we're variously in degrees of awakening or unfoldment, and we're all meant to kind of look over our shoulders at one another on that journey and extend as much love and fellowship and camaraderie as possible, because at the end of the day, it's the collective unfoldment or the collective awakening that is going to manifest the paradigm shift that's going to take our entire plane of existence into a higher realm. And so I'm more interested in participating in that collective unfoldment than I am in me reaching some kind of great samadhi state of mind and then going into some transcendental bullshit. No, man, give me my brothers and sisters any day of the week.
I agree. Now, Sasha, a lot of people, wanted to know more about this, the Babylonian False System and their agenda, and you're playing a major role in just waking people up.
You're asking about the legal system or about the Babylonian priesthood and the kind of more occultic...
The Babylonian priesthood, and then hopefully you can get into the legal system.
Sure, because they're actually the same, or they're so incredibly connected. It's a vast subject, and the truth is that I'm no expert at it. I'm just... I've got, I think, a fairly quick instinct in this stuff, and I know what stinks. And I know how to navigate around bullshit, and I know how to take down bullies. That's what I'm good at. So in my journey of learning and understanding, I've just really tried to get to grips with the bold brushstrokes of what it is that is so fucked up about our civilizational wheel. How much of that is to do with human beings manifesting that into the field? How much of it is to do with human beings being kind of subjugated or tricked into the Babylonian dream spell that is put upon us by this arcane Masonic secret societies and priesthoods and kingly lines and, the invisible hand. This is an old background texture to the human story. And it's a dance between how much are we victims of circumstance and how much are we manifesting and projecting the reality into the field. And the truth of the matter is, it seems to me that they are one and the same, that there is no such thing as victimhood. It doesn't matter how awful the story is that's unfolding. If it's happening to you, you are absolutely inviting it, invoking it, manifesting it at every level of expression. And actually, the quickest way to exit a shitty situation is to own it, is to look it square in the eyes and go, this is my self-reflection, this is my projection, this is what I am seeking to experience at the soul level, and the third density field is simply rising up to mirror to me that which I am invoking. If you own that, you recognize that actually the power exists within you. But having said that, I can speak a little bit about the Babylonian storyline. It's connected to the collective shadow. So the arcane priests and occultists and black magicians and dark lords of time and the evil wizards archetype, but all of the negative or low vibrational elements of our expression and our reality manifest in front of us in direct proportion to that element of our own selves that we are not looking at, that we're not addressing, that we're not owning. So it's perfect geometry, it's perfect symmetry, which is why ultimately we ought to see all of the bad stuff that manifests and give it a blessing. Thank you for the texture, thank you for the tone, thank you for self-reflecting that which has remained hidden from view. And once we can begin to just bless every footstep, our own footsteps, and recognize that we are the Babylonian priesthood, we are the lords of time, we are permissioning everything that manifests, then we really have a chance to step into super consciousness and into the superpower. Because at that point you can go, well, hey, if I'm the one conducting the orchestra and I don't like the song, stop conducting the orchestra. Or reboot, whatever. There's all sorts of options once you recognize that you are not a victim of anything. Having said that, it is quite plain that most human beings, most of the time, are being subject to ghastly experiences that they would be happier to escape from. So, of course, it makes sense that as we go through life, that we extend as much of our learning and our wisdom as possible to our brothers and sisters, Meaning to say, in life we can choose to stand on the side of the swamp and try and shout instructions at one another how to get out. Or we can dive into the swamp and actually pick each other up and pull each other out. And I would prefer to be diving into the swamp and not directing people from the sidelines. Because directing people from the sidelines is a remote game. It's like playing armchair philosophy or armchair spirituality. You know, you're telling the world, you're moralizing, you're telling the world how to do stuff, how to get to spaces, but actually you're not living it. I'd rather dive in. And I think we should all be diving in point of fact, and engaging with the texture of life. So the black priesthood or the dark elements of our history have been there in order to teach us, in order to self-reflect us into our higher states of evolution. We could speak about any of these lines, these bloodlines. We could speak about shape-shifting reptilian bloodlines, which absolutely exist. There's no question about that. The fact that most human beings are sat in armchairs with remote controls, addicted to MTV and to soda pop, that just says that they are inhabiting a very slim bandwidth of reality, and that they're not equal, they're not open to seeing the higher realms of expression. And so their brain is operating on 3, 4, 5% of its capacity. And we know that our DNA is largely asleep, so-called junk DNA. You know, so go figure. The average human being is firing up on 5% of its capability. That's a very, very slim bandwidth. And the same thing applies to the way that we perceive so-called reality. If you are in a heightened psychic capability, you are able to see beyond this limited visible spectrum of light. But again, we need to develop these faculties within ourselves to be able to then embrace higher forms of reality and see the higher realms of expression, which are all completely nested and embedded within this space-time coordinate. There are many, many worlds interposed, intermingling with this space-time coordinate. And actually, if we simply learn how to dial up or dial down the visible spectrum of light, we are able to engage in those realms and physically engage with them in a very real sense.
It's as if we, as human beings, are placing our consciousness into the filter of the mind and the senses, and our perception is very limited. And
Indeed.
so how important is it for us to get back into that sovereign state, you know, because a lot of people are aware and they are awakening to the whole legal fiction and the birth certificate and the Social Security and the fact that they are, you know, slaves.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because those are the mechanics of awakening. And that's the stuff I love. And you're absolutely correct. When people begin to make the distinction between the fiction and the organic or the living, this is the difference between, in scientific terms, we speak about entropy or neg-entropy. And entropy describes the entropic reality, the entropic universe, which we're taught this bullshit when we're kids and when we go to university. We're taught in the sciences that the world is entropic, that the universe is caught up in entropy, that everything is dying and decaying and rotting and slowly spreading into the great unknown, and we're going to slow down and freeze into oblivion. I mean, what a shitty reality. So no wonder we're so fucked up and dysfunctional if that's the primal message that's put into the field by our educators, by our older generations. In point of fact, it's a lie. It's part of the great lie. It's part of the great galactic sleep. The truth of the matter is that we inhabit an infinite, ineffable, majestic, unbearably beautiful multiverse. And in this little quadrant of the third density field of reality, we reign supreme, provided we know it. We are the sons and daughters of God. We are the kings and queens, the emperors and the empresses, but we have to own it. We have to know it for it to invoke its power. But once we do know it, then all the darkness is dispelled, because we become directly connected to so-called source. Your kundalini, the pineal, becomes absolutely inflamed and to the vibral mind of source. And at that point, you explode into the horizontal plane, meaning to say your heart erupts and the empathic wave comes out of your center and then moves around the earth and resonates and draws higher frequency values into it. This is how, at the subtle level of expression, we educate one another through empathy, through the extension of pure love and pure truth, not the kind of love they talk about in the Kardashians, incidentally.
Unconditional.
Well, I would say conditional. Conditional on absolute pure truth.
Okay. So now it's sort of like, you know, when you're trying to expand your consciousness, but being as though we are only working with two emotions, honestly, which is nothing more than fear or love. When you're trapped in fear, it's nearly impossible to see the positive aspect of the world and what it has to offer.
Well, fear is the texture of time. Fear is the texture of entropy, of the predisposition towards death, decay, and loss, sorrow, separation, all of that stuff. It's the great lie, it's the great myth. But love in its truest sense, or empathy in its truest sense, is affirmative, it's expansive, it's boundless, timeless, and that tells us all we need to know. Which universe would you prefer to inhabit? One which is decaying, dying, constricting, fearful, reductive, reflexive, aggressive, or would you rather inhabit a universe which is limitless, boundless, and expansive? So this is just a barometers of choice. But the truth is that human beings oscillate between both of those hemispheres. We're generally trapped between fear and desire. And desire is the same quanta as fear. In point of fact, they are inseparable. I've spoken about this a great many times, and I'll touch on it very briefly, but desire is an expression of the future, of running towards hope, towards something, in the hope that the thing that you desire will fulfill you, will finally fill the gap, fill the void. And
Sasha, are you speaking of more of a spiritual desire?
There is no separation between having sexual desire and having spiritual desire. In that sense, desire is desire is desire. To make a separation of what kind of desire is to take yourself off into an intellectual or philosophical conceit. We simply need to understand that desire in and of itself only speaks to hope and only speaks to the future, which is non-existent. It doesn't actually exist. It never does exist. The future never exists. Only the now ever exists. But similarly, looking back at time and having guilt and having regret and remorse is you looking back in time and again being reductive and fearful. So what does that teach us? That we should never be concerned with the past or the future. In that sense, we should absolve the entire past into the perfect now. And we should completely dissolve the future projections also into the perfect now. And in the perfect now is where we actuate. It's where we flame the mind and become completely activated and engage the universal soul or the universal expression. That's limitless. That's where we can really start to paint on the canvas of life and start to use our hidden potential and become the immortals that we truly are.
I completely agree. Now, speaking in terms of, the shift that's going on, and basically the positive aspects to this shift. Can you touch on, you know, all of the positive things that are occurring right now?
I can speak to it. I mean, it's again a huge question. What does the shift represent? What is taking place? In what ways are we being affected in this huge transcendental upgrade that appears to be happening? I mean, it's all interconnected. It's all speaking to a singularity of everything folding back into a singularity before we can move through a time gate or stargate and then engage the next huge dimension of expression. The extraterrestrial game, or the galactic cosmological storyline, is coming to a kind of fruition where we are having to shake ourselves awake from this modern sleep of denial, of pretending that we stem from the Abrahamic or the Adamic religions, and that's Noah and Beelzebub or whoever, these historical creatures that do not describe our reality at all. They describe fictions. Some of these historical apocryphal characters did exist in some way, but in the main, they are all the same creature. We talk about Jesus Christ, you talk about Krishna, you talk about Buddha, you talk about all of these figures, and they're all essentially, Osiris, they're all essentially the same myth, the same story, the same character, encoded with archetypes. And there is a reason why that same kind of story of the Son of God that has 12 disciples, is born of a virgin mother, and dies at the age of 33, all of that nonsense is speaking to archetypes that are nested within the program that has been installed. And it is a program. It's a civilizational program. And you could even say that program has been installed by extra-dimensional intelligence, because there's a tremendous amount of truth to that. The so-called archon or archonic intelligences, the lords of time that exist, as the all-seeing eye. We could go into any of these aspects of the supra-dimensional reality, and we could explore them and play with them. I'm not quite sure that it's going to serve our unfoldment here and now. It tends to take us off on beautiful journeys, which leave us just as confused as when we started. Again, I believe that the most valuable thing that we can be doing or discussing or investigating is always right here, right now. Because all the answers are known to the universal mind. And the universal mind can be tapped into by you and me only now. It can never be achieved by moving towards it. It always moves away from you if you move towards it. You cannot move towards pure truth. It will always evade you, always elude you. And you can't go back and claim it either, because those are dead ideas. No matter how beautiful or instructive, they are dead ideas. All religious myths, all cosmological narratives, all historical references are dead. They are also part of the great fiction. And there's a reason why, in the year 2016, we are more dumbed down and more stupid, probably, than ever before in relative history. It's a known fact that 12-year-old schoolgirls in Victorian England were 8 times more intelligent and intuitive and bright than the average, postgraduate student today. More worldly wise, more knowledgeable about, basic math, basic geography, basic astronomy. So all of the sophistication of our modern world is not actually serving our capacity to engage genius, our capacity to engage the super sensible or the super conscious. Again, because we are so intoxicated, so enchanted, so polluted, so pornographicized by a fictitious reality where all of our appetites are being fed all the time on high-octane bullshit, just speed frenzy, always. You have an appetite, hey, baby, we'll feed it for you, we'll feed it for you. And so long as our appetites are being fed, we are unable to engage the present. We cannot. Addictions are a huge problem. Addictions to appetite, whether it's eating food or it's sexualizing or whatever it is. Appetite is the big blind spot, because fundamentally addictions to appetite are where the so-called demonic possession enters in, where we have surrendered our true sovereignty and we allow for these cracks to appear in our auric, our plasma field, and that is an invitation to any or all lower astral entities, if they are in phase with your value. They are able, by permission of you, to enter and then drive your form and live through you. I've said this a number of times in media interviews, but there's a reason why when violent murderers and individuals stand up in courtrooms in front of the judge and the jury and say, it wasn't me, I don't know what came over me. They genuinely believe they weren't there, because they genuinely believe they're not capable of a rape or a murder or but at the time that it happened, it wasn't them. It was a lower astral entity that came in and drove them for that event. But it was by permission. Nothing happens by chance in that sense.
I completely agree. And I had a question. Well, people wanted to know, what did you think about extraterrestrials? And, basically how our DNA can be activated. Yeah.
Well, in the first instance, you are the extraterrestrial and I'm the extraterrestrial, and be sure of that. In the first instance, you have incarnated as a soul, almost certainly, in countless planes of existence and in countless worlds. This is part of the majesty of our soul expression, of sentience, is that we transmigrate, we move, we shapeshift, we transpose, transcend, transduce. We are constantly in a state of movement and flux. And we choose, through the laws of attraction or the laws of resonance, we choose to come into certain space-time coordinates and enjoy a certain experience, gain a certain level or value from those experiences, and ultimately purpose ourselves toward the greater goal of so-called ascension, of creating higher patterns of perfection through whatever our engagements are at the soul level. So whether you are some deviant wizard in the Middle Ages or you're an ascended master in the Himalayas, we are all of us variously fulfilling our task and in that great becoming, because the dark wizards are creating low vibrational texture against which the light can see itself, see its true shine and beauty, and be known to itself, and vice versa. The dark wizard needs the light to be able to reflect back to it how grisly its expression is. And so there's this beautiful dynamic going on. Having said that, the superconscious and engaging the superconscious means that you have to reach a 0 point, a place, a quanta that exists between that oscillation, between exploring the underworld and the so-called light, because they're both very much interconnected. The temporal, light and dark, or sun and moon, or those black and white archetypes are actually very much the same thing. And in order for us to consciously move beyond that oscillation dance of duality, we need to engage the super sensible, which is the perfect now, the perfect silence, the perfect 0 point, and disidentify. Stop identifying with anything that is fictitious, and engage only the atom seed of pure self-expression. That 0 point, and that's where you can then navigate. Having a perfect question in your mind, you can then navigate to the next world or the next realm. Yeah.
And this is what Walter Russell speaks of.
I'm not familiar with Walter Russell. Forgive me.
Okay, it's fine, but yeah, I've been researching him through Santos Bonacci. I recently interviewed Santos, and I've gotten into Walter Russell's work through him, which he talks about 0 point, and he also talks about how important it is to meditate. He went into this meditation state for about 39 days. And could you talk about how important meditation is for us to remain balanced?
Sure. You're asking Sacha Stone the question, and Sacha's answer is that meditation is entirely unimportant, is of no consequence and of no importance whatsoever. Now, I'm being a little bit reckless and cheeky by saying that, but I say that, Lia, because I've never meditated in my life. I've never shut my eyes and invoked a prayer. I've never meditated for one split second in this world. I've never contemplated my navel in that sense. I am one of those people who has hurled myself into life, into living, into being, into doing. And I believe I've engaged a certain measure of superconsciousness by tearing down as many limitations and enclosures as I possibly can. My own sense is that meditation becomes the worst possible limitation and enclosure to most people most of the time. Now, I say that because I'm old and ugly enough to have met with thousands of people who have meditated. I have traveled with masters, lived with a couple of masters, learned from extraordinary people over the course of my life, and I don't want to disparage any of those experiences. I've spent time with the Buddhist monks, very high rank, the highest ranking monks in Thailand and in India. I've spent time, many weeks at a time, with the great Vedic masters. I've spent time with medicine men and shaman in North Africa and the Middle East. The only place I haven't really explored these kinds of characters is in Central and South America. But I'm pretty expert. I'm very well traveled in that arena of trying to discover what is the general alphabet that takes us toward inner peace or inner bliss. Is it gargling ayahuasca or iboga or another earth medicine, or is it going to the top of a mountain range and going into pure silence for 3 months? Is it going to the beaches of Mexico and doing sun gazing for 9 months? All of these things are the truth for those who practice them whilst they're practicing them. And I'm sure that most people get something from it. I'm just saying to you that for me, I've never meditated in my life. I have no intention of doing so. I've studied meditation in as much as I have read and heard and explored the narrative. And I also know people in my life right now, to this day, who do meditate religiously, and it serves them incredibly well. Now, one of my closest friends and directors in New Earth is a man who is very, very disciplined and steeped in meditation. And wow, it works for him. It really, he's such a beautiful, anchored, resonant soul. And I don't dismiss it. I'm sorry to bang on for so long. I'm just saying to you, actually, the message I have is this, is it's important to recognize the following: each man in his own way, in his own time. and that meditation is applied to some and to others it absolutely isn't. There are some people, great artists, great composers, great poets, are people who invariably do not meditate because they absolutely do not need to meditate. When they go into that art, they are in a state of meditation, but it's dynamic consciousness in action. It's the opposite of what most people believe meditation to be, which is trying to still the mind and still the heart and identify the 0 points. And, of course, all you do is entertain the fucking monkey mind when you do that. It's the most annoying bloody thing, I'm sure of it. But there you go. That's my answer.
Yeah. And, yeah, I was going to say, because a lot of people meditate and, you know, their mind isn't balanced and they're not at that 0 point. They create more chaos within themselves. And, you know, it's an excuse for them to not take action in the world.
That is also my criticism of meditation or people going into a spiritual pursuit. As I said a little bit earlier, it's my contention that you will always fail if you pursue something. You may believe yourself to be achieving a state or a goal, but that's just all part of the psycho-intellectual or spiritual hubris. And I've again, old and ugly enough to have seen that particular failure emerge so many times in and around the people that I've witnessed in my life. So yes, I don't believe in moving towards objects. I don't believe in running from things. I believe in owning the now and turning the now into an infinitude of perfect expression and of never asking permission and of always conducting oneself in honor and engaging the highest patterns of perfection that one is humanly and superhumanly capable of.
And Sasha, you are vegan.
No, I'm not vegan at all. Okay. I'm absolutely not vegan. I don't like eating meat, and I'm increasingly becoming what you would coin a vegan, but no, I'm not a vegan, and I don't like veganism. I despise it in as much as I despise anything that's an ism, only because an ism becomes another enclosure. I know vegans who are absolute dickheads and who are soulless and who are completely lost to their own empathic capabilities. And they ponce around doing yoga, and they are spiritual wankers, and they are hardcore vegans. And you know, I've seen so many types in that realm, especially here, actually, where I am right now. I'm in one of the world's centers of spiritual bullshit. A place called Ubud in Bali, Indonesia, is a spiritual center of this kind of thing. And I'm not putting it down. It's actually wonderful. It's like a circus of spiritual zombies and lost souls. And yet what comes out of it is very beautiful, because there's also incredibly evolved people here. And they shine. But yeah, it's all a circus, man. So long as we give ourselves titles and engage in isms and try and define ourselves as this or that, creating a definition for oneself is to build a prison. One should be superhuman. One should be the highest expression that one can be. So whenever one describes oneself, one should only ever describe something that is ineffable, that has no limitation or boundary to it. The reason I'm saying that is because all words carry magic. And when I say I am a this or I am a that, I've just enclosed myself into a definition. And I have cast a spell at the same time. And all spells in that context are also prisons.
I think people are looking for an easy way out simply because they choose not to think for themselves. Many people are paying gurus a certain
That's tragic. And you're right. I see a lot of that here as well, Lia, and that's just tragic. Any guru who takes the silver dollar should be taken out the back and shot. That's my personal view. I'm very hard when it comes to this stuff. I can't broker these kind of bullshit artists. I don't care how fanciful they couch their language. You do not sell the dispensation of spiritual values. You offer it. You give it from the heart. You transmit it through the empathic wave. And if you're good at it, then the people around you will love you by return and will feed you by return and will make sure that you're looked after. You'll be carried along on a wave of love. But if you put your hand out for the silver dollar, you should lose your hand, in my view. This is sacrosanct. This is an area which brokers no discussion, in my view. You do not commercialize spiritual exchange. And if you do, you are sick.
And I'm glad you're touching on this because, you know, people have so much disinformation and, you know, we're going into this shift and, you know, we're in the age of the Aquarius and people are just going by this new age BS and sometimes, you know, they don't know what to think. And it's just so much out there that, you know, it's like, where do I go? Where do I start? And like I was asking Santos, who should we be studying? Who should we be researching now? And then he also touched on transcendental science. And, you know, he said that was a start for people. But, yeah, there's so much disinformation. And it's like I say, me personally, I always seem to go within myself. I'm not going to pay a guru. I'm not going to, you know, ask people outside of me. You know, if I sit in silence, I'll get the answers.
Beautiful. But you see, what you've just said is exactly correct. Because if you tap into that silence that you're describing, when you call it silence, I call it the now. And tapping into that silence of now is the only place you can engage the super soul. And the super soul is the thing that is affirmative, that creates opportunity, that showers you with grace, so long as you are open to receive it. And it's really simple mathematics. It's really simple language. But in order to engage that simple space, we have to learn to disengage from the fiction, from the Luciferianism, meaning to say the false light. And most of these so-called gurus and most of these so-called disciples and seekers are all of them variously addicted to false light. And so they shape-shift and exchange these false light values with one another. They engage a whole social ecology based on false light. And ultimately, their teeth fall out, their hair goes gray, and they drop dead anyway, without having realized the super soul. And that's tragic. I intend in this life to engage with immortality. That's me speaking. I intend to engage with the super soul in a way that no living man has ever done before. If I have an ambition, that's it. I'm not letting go of that. I know how increasingly expansive I'm getting in life by holding this space and by not letting it go. And my capacity to love and to be loved is increasing. Every day I'm on this temporal plane. I feel it, I see it, I know it to be true. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to behold. And I will continue doing that until I can no longer do it. And at that point, I very much hope I'll be able to steer my plasma into the next incarnation with my super sensible will.
And also, expansion occurs when you're living in the moment. I've experienced this. Like when I'm living in the moment, it's like for instance, yesterday, you know, so I'm driving my car on the highway, and you know, I'm thinking to myself, universe, let me know that I'm in alignment with you. Show me some sign that shows me that I'm special and that I'm connected to the infinite intelligent source. And I swear to you, Sasha, like my intuition said, Leah, watch out. And I turned around, I looked in my rearview mirror, this car literally almost hit my car, and I swerved, got away, and he hit the car behind me. And I was like, holy crap. I was like, it was like divine intervention.
Sure.
You know, so I was like, wow, I'm in the now, you know, and I'm taking action. And when you talk about desire, like that's all you need. And, you know, when you're not focused on the past or the future, your power is here and now. There is no fear. There's only that love that you speak about.
Well, fearlessness is the same thing as timelessness. And where timelessness and fearlessness exist, then only pure truth remains. And the atom seed of pure truth is universal mind, the all-seeing, the all-knowing, the all-being, the ineffable, the nameless.
state of being formless and faceless and nameless.
Surely.
Now, Sasha, did you want to talk about what you had going on with the New Earth Project? Like, I know you don't want to get into it, but just let people know, like, the positive things that you have going on with it.
It's too complicated a subject to do so. There's so many websites out there. We've got New Earth Media, which is pumping out 24/7, who and what we are. There's so many films out there. I would really recommend that anyone interested in the New Earth Project can go and just Google that, and it'll come back and navigate through that stuff that's out there. In very simple terms, the New Earth Project is a brain trust that's being driven by a group of people, that's a large group of people around the world, who are all committed to the ideal of service to others over service to self. We are all committed to the ideal of making absolute distinction between our sovereign, conscious expression and the informed, controlled reality that is drip-fed to us by a deviant, old paradigm of history, of bad science, of government, mind control, pedophile rings, rotten churches and religious myths that have only sought to harvest human beings away from our superconsciousness, and that whole bullshit paradigm that we are thankfully hurtling away from right now, and will soon see enter into space dust altogether. Certainly within the next 3, 4, 5 years, we're likely to see a complete end to this old paradigm, to these old shadows. And New Earth Project is what is emerging. It's conscious beings from around the world who are all variously observing, witnessing, and participating in the manifestation of the new patterns of perfection. And what we're doing is trying to identify what those patterns are. They are everything from new so-called sustainable economics modeling, technology, innovation, and breakthrough of free energy systems and futuristic technologies which can remediate all the world's problems, from remediating the water, the air, the soil, bringing food back to where it should be. It moves into patterns of the built environment and bioarchitecture and bioresonance, and how we should be living in a completely organic and resonant environment which feeds us and nurtures us at every level, mind, body, and soul, and doesn't poison us, pollute us, and turn us into cancerous objects. And all of these different patterns of perfection that we're beginning to identify are being nested together in the New Earth Institute, and the New Earth Nation is what is emerging out of that New Earth Project, where we've got people and communities all around the world beginning to understand that you don't need to continue engaging the fiction of government and mind control and religious myth. You can actually end the invisible contracts with government. Get rid of the passports and the registrations. Deregister yourself from all of that fictitious enterprise. For those of you who've got the stomach for it, like myself, go on the front foot and begin to cut the dragon's head off. If you want to, start the private prosecutions against those criminal elements of your local government and your federal government, and begin to club together and educate yourself and join arms with your brothers and sisters and go and take down Babylon. Which those amongst us who are warriors should absolutely be doing that. Those of us who are not warriors should be at home turning the GM Monsanto polluted farms into organic, life-affirming farms, and making the world a better place in any way that we can. But this business of simply drifting along with the status quo, that is unacceptable. That needs to stop. And that is where unconsciousness exists in our world, is where people, as I said, sitting in their sofa with the remote control in one hand and a beer or crack pipe in the other hand, are simply drifting with the status quo and making these febrile comments and judging things and opinionating on Facebook and Twitter as if they've got something to say. They've got nothing to say. They never had a real original thought in their lives. They never had a real erection in their lives. They never made love properly to a man or a woman. They never walked out their front door and put a spade in the ground. So what the hell are they doing on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, polluting the ethers with their trivia and their mediocrity? You see, this is where I get angry. And this is the dragon I'm talking about taking down. The dragon in our own midst. The suburban ignorance. The pig ignorance that exists. And the reason why I'm so vehement about this, Leah, is because it is that stupid dragon drunk on mediocrity in suburbia, paying its taxes. That is the creature that is devouring this planet. That is the creature that is allowing the sacrifice of innocence and the wars, the murder, the plunder, the mayhem that's going on in 95 countries around the world today that are not in the United States, that are actually propping up that dragon. So it's a big story how our ignorance and how our complicity with the status quo is actually directly responsible for blood economy and for the sacrifice of innocence. That's the real story.
Wow, that's really deep. Now, Sasha, did you want to talk about anything in particular, anything you feel as though you should share with the world besides, everything else we spoke about?
You'll have to be a little bit more specific about the question, I'm afraid, love. I've explained already that my big passion is that people wake up from that galactic sleep and take self-responsibility and step outside of the fiction. And if they don't know how to do it, learn about it. Follow your nose, follow your instinct, follow your intuition. Even what I've been talking about, what we've been talking about in the last hour has dropped enough indicators for anyone to be able to intuitively follow certain ideas that have been discussed and said. And that's the thing, to actually begin to step outside of the informed wisdom, the program that we're told and taught and programmed with, and actually begin to follow the inner navigation system. Listen to that little voice in the gut that's saying, walk away from that. Yeah, maybe everyone at school thinks that. Fuck them. Maybe everyone in the church thinks that. Fuck them. I am not going to follow the herd in the church or the community or the school just because it feels comfortable to follow the herd. The herd has always walked over a cliff. That's what herds do. Herds go to the abattoir and get slaughtered. Herds are always there to be culled. So why on earth do we insist on following the herd? We should be smart enough to know that we should pull away from the herd and move to high ground and engage a higher expression. And for those of us who've learned to do that in life, who've learned to not go with the status quo because it felt comfortable and because it gave us the next degree at the Masonic Lodge, or it gave us the next salary hike or the next promotion, and we play that safe bullshit suburban game to shuffle along and just pay into the system. To what end? That's not something worthy. That's not something that's going to take us into our higher consciousness or into a state of bliss or into a state of anything other than mediocrity. And I know when I'm speaking like this, I offend so many people. I know that. There's a part of me, a real boring part of me, that is also offended by these kinds of ideas. But I know that it is that kind of shakedown that most of us need most of the time. We got to get out of this false light comfort zone because it's sick, it's twisted, it's demented, it's completely wrapped in dystopia, which is the opposite of what we should be in this world. Again, we should be out there manifesting patterns of perfection. We should be surfing in our bliss. We should, every one of us, be going into creative expansion hyperdrive and building homes that we want to make babies in, and building art and creating every single action should be intoxicated with beauty. And it can be. I know, because we're doing it. Me and my crew, if you came here in Bali and saw what we're doing right now in building, it's paradise. And we're doing this in multiple places around the world with the New Earth Project. And I mean multiple. I think on June 20th this year, on Midsummer's Day, we're doing a day-long festival. For anyone who's looking in on the New Earth Nation, on the New Earth Project, there's going to be a day-long festival in Midsummer this year where we're going to unveil all the other groundbreaking havens, New Earth havens around the world. And next year, we're planning a 9-day festival. The full New Earth Festival is being planned for next year for anyone who's interested in plugging into this space and seeing where hundreds, thousands of us are now taking this space and walking in a straight line and manifesting the world that we live in and not the one that's been spoon-fed to us.
Now, if people want to participate, how can they contact you?
I'm not the right person to ask, curiously enough, but if they go to the website, New Earth Nation or New Earth Project, it should direct them to the people in New Earth Project who are engaged in facilitating volunteer. I mean, anyone's welcome to reach out to me. My stats are easily available also, I think, on any of the websites, and I welcome anyone connecting. I'll always engage one way or the other. It might take me 2 or 3 months to get back to people, but I'll do it. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Sasha, we basically covered everything I wanted to know, and I actually had an hour here with you, so I just wanted to wrap it up, and I just wanted to thank you, and I want you to know that I do appreciate and respect all of your work and what you have going on now. So I just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this interview with me.
Beautiful, Lia. Thank you. It's delightful talking to you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You can hang up. I'm just going to figure this out to make sure I don't cancel anything out. I don't want to lose this recording.
Okay. Well, let me know in the next day or two how it's all run, and if you need help with getting it out there, we'll absolutely spin it out in our channels. No worries.
Okay, I will definitely send you the link.
Good. Look forward to it. Love.
Thanks, Sasha.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.